Good. So good afternoon, everybody. First of all, thank you for being here today and welcome to the first webinar of our Mobility as a Service webcast series. Over the next 40 minutes, we will have the opportunity to listen to an industry-wide conversation about achieving the full potential of mobility as a service. We will be discussing two of the most important aspects around mobility as a service, which is demand and data. During the webcast, you can write questions in the Q&A box, and at the end of the panel, we will open a Q&A session. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our three panelists: Laura Ruter, Head of International Sales and Business Development from ioki. Welcome.
Thank
Harald
you.
Croft, Global Automotive Leader from Deloitte, and Johan Garim, Director of Marketing and Business Development from Ruter. Thank you once again for joining us today. An outstanding panel of experts with us, each bringing a lot of knowledge and experience in the field of mobility as a service. I'm Katarina Rothman, Global Automotive Sector Specialist from Deloitte, and I will be moderating today's webcast. Good, so let's start it. Harald, please let me start with a question for you. As a global automotive leader at Deloitte, you have published a study on how to make mobility as a service work that presents like a kind of blueprint of for a mobility as a service operating model. Could you give us a few words on what you have found in this study?
Okay, thank you, Kathy. Hello, everybody. Well, basically, it's pretty simple, but also, unfortunately, pretty complicated. You know, there is a huge demand for smart mobility solutions, politicians, voters, and also consumer-wise. We assume a market globally in 2030 by 500 billion euros on that. But if you look at the demand, this is there. But if you look at the supply, it is not yet there. You know, the supply side is maybe not as developed as it should be. And there's also a question about the economic attractiveness of this business. And we used an AI-based natural language processing analysis to evaluate the main MaaS systems, so the main providers as well as the main cities, and to find out where they are, what is development over the last 7-8 years was. And after the hype that we have seen just before COVID, we only see a little bit of a recovery after that. So of course, COVID was not very helpful for this, but also the main drivers that we see and the main drivers that we see to make mobility as a service happening. So additional benefits, what are the assets, investment on that, what are governance mechanisms or traffic, other platforms on that. This is still maybe not where it should be. But the whole thing is, of course, very complicated because the mobility as a service solution, this is not only a private thing, it is a public-private thing. You have, of course, always the public with you because we are talking about public spaces. And so we identified 4 modules for our MaaS operating system to cut the elephant into pieces.
Thank you so much. Laura, ioki is one of the very important actors in the mobility as a service. Could you provide more insights into ioki's role in a mobility as a service operating model?
Yeah, thank you, of course. So first of all, maybe I need to say that ioki is really there to strengthen public transport. Like that is always our ultimate goal, right? And in order to have a strong public transport, there are various things that you need to consider. And just to like maybe name 2 things. One is, for example, that you have to have an offer that really matches like the user needs. And another thing is in regards to easy access to, can be information, it can be ticketing, whatever, right? So the easy access to these different mobility forms that we have. And I mean, let's have a look at today. I mean, Harald already pointed out a few things, but let me also give another perspective into it. Just to give you like a real life example, I'm like personally working like in my neighborhood on having a super block. And you can imagine, well, maybe not everyone knows what a super block means. It means simply that you have less traffic through your neighborhood, that you give the streets back to the people. You can play there, picnic, whatever you want. But of course, one big hurdle is that people don't want to miss their parking space, right? Which would then be definitely reduced. So End of June, we will have like a super block weekend, and just to show the people how great it is so that more people would support us. And my idea was, okay, let's take away the hurdle of using other mobility forms, right? So that people maybe use less their car, maybe don't use it at all anymore, and use other mobility forms. I live in Wiesbaden. We are around 300,000 people, inhabitants. I needed to call up to even more than 20 companies. So we had 20 different public transport mobility forms, yeah, from bike sharing to e-scooters whatsoever. So now imagine a user like me, for example, because I'm from the city. What shall I do? Shall I download 20 apps, or some of them don't even have an app? So it's a website, others it's phoning, the next one is email, and so on. So the hurdle is quite high. So the idea in the end, of course, of MaaS is to have everything in one app and make it really easy to access. So where does now ioki come into place? So we are part of one of these mobility forms, right? So we have the solution as software in regards to on-demand. Others know it also as DRT. And what we have done to create a transition and to support this is definitely, first of all, of course, having the technical part done. So having an API, of course, that functions very well so that you can easily integrate into any kind of app. The other thing, and that's also what Harald already mentioned, is also in continuous conversation with the different stakeholders. So we talk to our customers, which can be operators, that can be the cities. And then, of course, also, quite honestly, also talking to competitors, for example, yeah, because we have to work together on this topic. It only works, really, the new mobility only works partnering. So let's get a step back and really make this possible. And of course, talking to MaaS providers so that we are all ready whenever a customer comes and shows a clear interest. So so that's what we try as a ioki. We really say, let's get away from white label apps. This can be just an interim solution. The solution must be to have like one app covering all the mobility forms.
Thank you, Lara. 20 different mobility companies only in Wiesbaden in Germany. It seems that we have a big challenge here. You want to make it work in a country or even in Europe, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Johan, you created a mobility as a service ecosystem in Norway. Could you tell us more about it and about Ruter's strategy for a successful MaaS ecosystem?
Yes, sure. Hi, everyone. Hello from Oslo. So our strategy, we're building it on our vision, which we call sustainable freedom of movement. Mm-hmm. What we mean by that is we want to build a system that will give the citizen an opportunity to move when they need to move, and to do that in a sustainable way. So our goal is not to have the most people travel most of the time. We need people to have the opportunity to move. So we are owned then by the city and the region around Oslo and Akershus, and our strategy is to help our owners reach their political goals. Their political goals is based on the sustainable development goals, and in order for us to be an efficient tool to reach those, and then we're talking broadly climate, social inclusion, how this works for the area we have around us, we need to build a data-driven system. So we need to combine the data from all the different transportation modes with data from the customers and set that together in the systems that is personalized, very close to the customers, understanding the underlying needs and be a relevant solution for them. So we need to widen our portfolio of transportation options. From today, it's bus, tram, metro, and ferries, which is a standard service we have. Most of it electrified, by the way. But we need to make that much more personalized to each person, and we need to expand it. So we need to introduce on demand, which we will have live in a few months. And of course, we are very eager to see how and when we can integrate the self-driving cars into our systems. So that's our strategy and how we are thinking around this in order to achieve the overall goals. And if we come to this data-driven system, that will be a system based, which will be run by algorithms. Today we are planning our system based on where we think our customers are living. we have a fully data-driven system, and somebody will decide what those algorithms should be optimized for. So we think that the public-owned companies should be spearheading that development so that the algorithms actually are optimized for reaching the goals that the society wants to achieve, not just the solutions that the transport providers, which often are private-driven companies that have motives for or setting up algorithms to maximize profit. But we will set up systems that are maximizing the value for society.
Thank you, Johan. You mentioned the demand, so let's deep dive into the demand aspect. Harald, would you like to share your insights on the role of demand and the requirements of traffic on a successful mobility as a service product?
Yes, of course, I can also build on that what Laura was saying. She was saying, so MaaS is all about partnering, and I think that's clear. MaaS is basically an ecosystem play, and in all those kind of ecosystem plays based on digital platforms, what Johan was also starting to explain. The most critical criteria for success in this kind of platform, whatever you say, in whichever business you are, is it now MaaS or what, or making platforms for like Netflix or all of those kind of things, is to create volume and traffic on the platform. I think that's the most important thing. You know, we can do as much as we want to on the IT side and much do on all the governance side. We have to create traffic because that's the sole criteria for success in this, because volume creates additional volume, then you can have more offers on that. So I think therefore it is absolutely crucial to get the demand in these platforms. The demand is on there. Well, that's, of course, we all know this, not that easy, because in mobility, we all know is a classical phenomenon between attitude and behavior. You know, if you are asking people, everybody wants to take, of course, smart mobility solutions. Everybody is for this, and also the super blocks, Laura, everybody has it. But as you were nicely putting it, yeah, but where's my parking lot? You know, so I think at the end of the day, we must be clear. For it is sometimes an issue from people that making mobility as their professional being, like us here on this call, but at the end of the day, for the normal people, this is only an thing from A to B. You know, that's something they are not talking about mobility all the time. That this must be convenient, that must be cheap, and it must be, you know, was fitting to their lifestyles. And I think that's, of course, the issue that we have here. And also, there's one other element which we all also know from ourselves. Mobility is very much habitualized, the behavior of people. You really have to nudge people to say, okay, why are you now going with a car for this distance? Can't you maybe take a train, or can't you take maybe an e-bike, something like this? So people are having this kind of routines. So having said this, how to get now the platform filled? You know, there are, I think, two big angels. On the one side, the private customer. That is, of course, you have to really attract them, get them, and nudge them, get them on there with attractive offerings as well. So maybe not only things like mobility, but also maybe other solutions, because that's also a point. People do not like to have 15 apps to organize their life. You know, it would be good if you could combine things, also city marketing topics in there, additional things. I think we see it also outside with the big companies like the Ubers of that world. You know, they are also having an Uber Eats. You know, guess what? Because they want to have one app that people are doing important things and not changing between the apps. And then we also, and I think that's the point that we should maybe have a look at in the MaaS solutions a bit more, in my opinion, is also to attract the corporate world, because also this kind of mobility budget, what companies are now going to, instead of having company cars, giving mobility budget on this, might be also a very good opportunity for this kind of smart mobility apps and solutions to get a big chunk of people in this on this platform. So I think we have to both side, the private customer and as well as the corporate customer, and those two together, I think it's really to create a demand. But as I said, that's not an easy exercise, because as we're saying, customers are a bit difficult here.
And I think we have here two points. I mean, the first one, the behavior and also the habits are changing. So there I have a question for Laura. And then the other way around, we can change the habits and also the behavior of people with our with the apps. So Laura, how have user habits or behavior influenced the ioki passenger app?
A lot. In the end, that's absolutely the base, right? I always love to say it must be a mix out of like qualitative and quantitative input. So one thing is definitely the data. So you can get a lot of insights out of it, understand like which are like the areas where you can improve. You can conduct user testing, what we have done, but also, you know, continuously evaluate the reviews that you get. You get a lot of insights there. But of course, also, and this is also super important, talking with our customer, but also with the end user in the end, to really understand what they need. So we have done this continuously in the past, 6 years that we exist. And right now, just to give an example, we have now a rating app, must be now around 4.8 out of 5. So there is a huge user acceptance, because I liked a lot the idea Harald just mentioned. Why just have a MaaS in the regards to mobility? Why not having something that also includes other things in there, right, that are relevant for the inhabitants? And however, what is super important is to have a super good user experience, because only then there's a huge user acceptance for this app platform, like for the app. And then you will also get the traffic on it. And then having the traffic, you get all the data. And this is really not to be underestimated, the great data that you get out of it. Because if I imagine what we are already doing today, just with the data that we have through our app, that's already a lot, because you can already really see how people behave, you know, how to improve areas and so on. But imagine if you can really get all the data, and use it. So there's a lot of potential in there.
Thank you, Laura. Harald, Johan, some insights or comments on Laura's point of view?
No, I totally agree on that. And we're also thinking a lot on, of course, how to get qualitative input from the customers, but also the quantitative. And what we're seeing now with the data and the AI, this will give us a total new view to or new tools to actually understand the customers on the not just to say on a static basis, but on the real-time basis, so we can optimize. So in order for us to achieve our strategy, we need to be very close to the customer. We need to build services that we're not forcing them, but that are attractive and that they want to actually use, like Harald was mentioning. And then we need to get so close that we understand not just the needs for the transportation, but trying to understand the underlying need for why they need to travel in the first place, and also get closer to key decision processes that the customers are taking. And that's not the travel, but also, like, you know, in Norway, or most, I guess, listeners know that we have very high penetration of electrical vehicles. We're almost only selling those. And when you first bought an electronic vehicle, and our electricity price as well is pretty cheap, it's a free of charge vehicle you have there. It will take you anywhere you want at no cost, almost. So we need to also understand how can we influence that decision because if we are to succeed with a MaaS solution, we need also to take down the ownership of cars, and if that's the number 1 car or number 2 car. And then that comes back to the portfolio options we need to have. So we are working a lot on this, and a key part of our strategy is to say that we need to be in the customer interface, like also you were saying, Laura, that is where we meet the customer. That's where the decisions are taking, and how can we influence the choices, and thinking around how we use nudges or well, you know, the power of the default solution, which solution for travel coming up first, how do we guide the customer through the journey? That has an incredible power over the actual decisions. And we're also introducing gamification variants, which we now have this ticket system where you buy a simple, for us, like most cities in Europe, you buy a ticket to enter into a system. You can buy a single ticket or a monthly ticket or somewhere in between. And we have introduced a single ticket with a gradual, you get a lower price if you buy more tickets. So then you get, it's not much, it's like 10 euro cent, 20 euro cent when you buy a new ticket, but that feeling that, okay, I spent much money on the single ticket. I feel like maybe I should bought the monthly card, but you see that the price is falling and it's so little money. They go to the coffee shop afterwards and buy a coffee for much more expensive than what they will save probably throughout the month. But that feeling of just having something that influences the behaviors in a way that's positive, that's very it's very interesting to see how important that is.
Thank you, Johan. Well, we had the demand part highlighting critical size as a key factor, improvements based on users' experiences, and incentive to influence user behavior. Let's jump to the data topic. Johan, there are significant opportunities that come with a data-driven economy. But how to balance these huge opportunities using the data with the privacy concerns from its travelers?
Yeah, that's a very important question, and it's often presented as a trade-off. And I think for the short term, it probably is a trade-off indeed for some type of services. But what we are at the core of our strategy is to say we have to build this system on trust. We are totally dependent on having a system where we can get some data from the customers, and that they trust that we will take good care of it and use it for the purposes that are intended to. So we see it across many industries. People are willing, myself included. I give all my pictures of my 3 daughters to Google, and I have no clue what they do with it, but I trust some American company giving them all the pictures. They know everything about them because they're so good to organize the pictures for me. But that in the future, we have to trust in a long-term position that we are building, if we are able to build that trust with the customer, this will actually be a competitive advantage for us, because the customer then will maybe be willing to share the calendar, for example, with us, so that we can give optimized transport solution in return, or we can they can share something about the kids' activities with us, so we can also tailor-made some transport options, so you don't necessarily have to go home and drive with your own car, take the kid to soccer practice. But that is totally dependent on trust for the long term. So we need to be very firm that we design our solution with data privacy from the start.
So basically, we have to trust. So Harald, what's the role of the EU here in this trust, and also around the standardization of data exchange?
Maybe one thing before I come to this point, Kati, one thing I think to say, really, I think my opinion, also what I'm hearing from many people in this area, is that if we really want to make mobility as a service successful, and I think we have to do so, because otherwise we will never achieve a kind of green cities achieving their CO2 emission standards that they has to do within the EU Green Deal. We have to make the orchestrator of an MaaS much more than only a broker on top, with an app on top of everything else. I think what we really need is a more integrated end-to-end solution on that, because then we can be closer to the customer. Because when we, of course, just give you one example, when we of course have all the information, what is missing, for example, to get a mobility journey, there is a broken piece in there because there is maybe a bus missing at one certain point in time between A to B, where the people say, okay, I would take this, but then I'm standing here and I can't get away from here. We all know if you are only the broker, it takes you for ages to make a kind of, okay, how to change that. And I think we have to find a solution that we have then the public spaces involved, but also maybe other players to make that happen quickly, so that the customer are also being heard, and we get also a progress in it. Because every city, they would know exactly what they should do to make some of those things better, but it takes, then we all know this, quite long to get then the players together. And so this kind of integration is, in my opinion, extremely necessary. And this is, of course, an even more data driven. Now, the point is, we all know, and for good reasons, the EU is very sensitive on data. And I think this general data protection regulation want to keep data, personal data, personal and secured. And I think that's also quite needed on that. So at the point, I think that's important. But we should maybe find a more clever solution than maybe to get the data away from the individual thing, to say it is Harold driving or Johan or Laura, but it is a person driving, and you cannot completely say it is now Harold or Laura or whoever it is, because we need this more integrated data flow, also cross-border data. We all know that it is, I'm also working quite intensively in autonomous driving. Guess what? If you are crossing the border in Europe, you must avoid that the car is not hitting the brakes, because you are now crossing from Germany to France, because you have different data laws in there, and therefore the car says, okay, now I have to check what I have to do. So I think this kind of this cross-border data transfer is necessary, and as well as also data localization. So I think we need, and that's, I think, not an easy task, and I think also a very sensitive task with this thing about data leakage and all the things. But I think it is, we have to find a solution on this to get the data available, because then I think both of you mentioned that at the end of the day, to make MaaS successful is that we have the data, and then we start with AI to make those data better and improve the whole thing, and get it then better optimized. And therefore, of course, we can use an AI for an individual part of the data set. But if we have the full data set, then we can, of course, make a much better optimization. So therefore, that's a big issue. And it is, luckily, many people are working on that, also for MaaS solutions, but that's still a way to go.
Mm-hmm.
Good. So the last question is for you, Laura, before we open the Q&A question. So don't forget, you have the, not the chat, but the Q&A box there. You can write your questions. Laura, how is ioki using data and also AI to cater the needs of different customer segments? I'm talking about city versus suburb resident, or elderly and younger generation. I mean, the different segments.
Yeah. So of course, I mean, every segment has different needs, right? And we can really discover that through data. So what we can see, just as a mini, like small example, we can see, for example, what is the average time that an elderly person needs for a drop off and pick up. Yeah. And then we can help the customers to really put the right data in and really the right timings and so on. So these are really small things, but in the end, help a lot in efficiency, but also in the user experience. So I mentioned already the user experience before, so we use it a lot to improve our UX on the app. But what we also do is, Joanne also just mentioned it in regards to real-time data. Yeah, let's not miss out on that one. These are also super important, because in the end, with that, at least on our side, what we do, we can improve our waiting time, so it becomes more interesting for the users. We do dynamic pooling, so no matter at what time someone requests a transportation, we can make it match, right? So, but also things like what is the best routing, yeah, for the vehicle. What is the most environmental friendly one? Because Joanne also mentioned it, it's not just about money. Many of you might know ioki is part of the Deutsche Bahn, so from the German railway company. So for us, public transport comes first indeed. And therefore, it's relevant to really use all the data that we have available. Now, we all know it's not always so easy, because sometimes the data is too small. So, and that's also where then MaaS comes again into place. I think Oslo does not have such a big problem, because you have a lot of inhabitants, but also maybe already in your suburban areas, it gets a little bit more difficult. So the more people use it, the more data you have and the better conclusions you can get out of it. And so what we also do is, I think, Harald, you mentioned it, also in regards to best transportation option. So for example, data is super important. What we do is we look into, okay, does it make more sense to offer to the customer on demand? Or is there a bus at the same time that more or less, has the same timing and so on, and should that maybe be offered? So also for that, you can use the data. So another thing that we also heavily do is, of course, we share the data with our customers, and so that they can do further improvements and also analysis. We also do huge analysis for our customers to see, to improve, for example, the operating hours, or should the area be changed, or do you need more or less vehicles in that area? So there are plenty of opportunities to use the data. And as I just mentioned, like the MaaS data would be even better, because you then have more and you can even get better conclusions out of it, or more accurate, maybe, I would say. And these can be really used by the cities, to create a better mobility plan, can be used by the operators to increase, for example, efficiency. And also from our side, as I mentioned, as a solution provider, we use it a lot also to understand the end users. So plenty of opportunities to use the data.
So Isis, thank you so much. I loved this discussion. I have to say, I love your examples, Laura. Thank you for your insights, Harald and Johan. Any comments before we open the Q&A session? Remarks? Okay, in that case, I will say, Esther, is there any question from the audience?
Are a few. I'm going to try and pick one for everyone due to time. So let's start. What is the minimum viable ecosystem to make a MaaS solution work for every major stakeholder in a city? I assume this is an open question for everyone.
You want to go, Laura, for that one?
I thought you would like to go because you started already with it. What is the minimum? Can you repeat the minimum viable? What exactly product? Did you say
Sorry.
product?
It's what is the minimum viable ecosystem to make a MaaS solution work for every major stakeholder in a city?
Minimum ecosystem. Well, at least two, right? Because otherwise, if you're alone, it's not an ecosystem. I mean, in the end, what you definitely need is a MaaS provider, right? I mean, some cities do it by themselves. I'm not sure, Ruter, how you do it, like Johan, how you do it with Ruter. Do you have your own, or did you buy it externally?
No, we're building our own solution.
All right, yeah. Because there are already two options, right? Or you buy it or you make it yourself. So that's already one first part, right? And then the second thing is definitely you need at least two providers of a mobility form to even get started, right? And to combine them in one app. That's definitely another one. That I would say is for the moment, the first base, I would say, for the ecosystem. But maybe Johan and Harald, if you want to add, maybe I come up with more ideas. I never really thought about that. What is the minimum ecosystem you need?
Yeah, I can add on. So I think the MaaS concept is brilliant in a way that it changes the cost model from having a one-time investment decision where you buy a car, like I mentioned, and you use it for free, to move the cost to each time you choose a travel. So that's perfect. The problem I see with MaaS, which has been a concept for many years, is that in itself, just to provide a lot of mobility options in an app, it's good, but it's not, at least not what we see around us here in Oslo. It's not changing habits. So you need, I think, more. And what we see as a game changer, really a game changer here, is when we combine the on-demand services that many cities already have. We are piloting here, and we also have it running for certain type of services. But when you can combine that with a self-driving technology and you integrate that into the public transport system, because, and I think that's the crux here, that if we are not actively working, like Laura was mentioning earlier, to see how the MaaS is integrating public transport, the self-driving car technology wave that will come will not be particularly good for society. It would be a lot of car traffic because it will be very cheap. And it will be so attractive. It will be very difficult for politicians to say we don't want this here, because there will be a lot of push for having these services. So how do we make sure that we use, and we can use electric self-driving cars to replace buses that we have in our service today that are not sustainable? So a lot of our services today, we drive big buses outside of Oslo with very few customers. We can make that more sustainable, and we can actually have an attractive solution that will replace and more replace the actual need for the car. So we're taking out the car from the option. So then I don't know if that's the minimum, but in order to really to make MaaS scale, I think we need to get there. And the way we see it, it's we're coming there soon. So we are now working hard to set up not just the development department that I work for, but the whole Ruter to be able to prepare for this new this change that will come.
I think we could not say a lot of the on-demand services, and of course this is extremely necessary to get the autonomous car whenever they will come. So at the end of this 10th year, we will see them, I'm sure, because there are some projection already in the US that it is much cheaper to let the car drive around autonomously for 2 hours in the city instead of go 1 hour in a parking lot in the US. If you have $20 for a parking lot for 1 hour, then it's cheaper to have the car driving around on its own. Just imagine the nightmare that we will create with that technology. But maybe but maybe as a minimum size, I think we once made a kind of a not very sophisticated but still a bit calculation. What is the minimal size of users, so of people on the platform? And I think what we were seeing is something about 50,000 plus is something that needs to get also enough volume on there on create also other activities. So I think there is still a kind of a minimal size in that to become more economically viable having on that.
Right. Then we have another one. How local bus transportation models should change to better fit with the needs of sustainable mobility. Johan, would you like to answer that one?
Yeah, how the traditional bus models that we use today, how they will have to change. Yeah, so I think I guess I've touched upon this already, that in a way in the last answer, but that we need buses for a long time to come, but there are many parts of our system where we can solve the needs of our citizens more efficiently, both cost-wise and for the environment, and for more people. So we can actually reach more people if we have more tailor-made transport solutions. So we need to start. So what our strategy is different from others, that we're trying to make the buses run the same as they run before, only that we take out the driver and the buses drive themselves. This is different. We think a little bit differently, that we should put in self-driving cars where our services is either not good or not sustainable in environmental other reason, and that's how it will develop together. So we have many lines that are very profitable for us with high density of people, and that should continue indeed. But we should see this as it's not cannibalizing our own services, but it's supporting and strengthen the original the bus service that we'll need to have it for many years.
May I also add something there? So indeed, the operators until now, what is pretty interesting is I was just hiking the other day and I saw like the schedule, and there was something like last update 2006, something like this. 2006 is like almost 20 years ago, and they still have the same schedule. And I'm sure it was not the only example. And so I believe that the operators really have to look more into what really the users need. And it's not like, okay, here's the bus stop and every 2 hours the bus runs. So there's more than that, right? And therefore, I totally believe in mass transportation. We need trains, we need buses. Yeah, in a certain peak hours, you need buses. You cannot have like mini shuttles when you have like hundreds of people that want to move, right? So you will definitely have the mass buses so that they will stay. And as you also mentioned, Johan, there are some that are really well used, right? But then there are many others. So the average load factor on a bus is 8 people. It's not really a lot, right? If you think about it. So, so there are different options that the operators can look into it. So one is, for example, you can have on demand on a line based. So it means there is still a line and there are still bus stops and so on. But for example, the bus comes only when really there's a request. Yeah, this is one option. Another thing is, and Johan mentioned it many more times than I did, even though I'm working on this solution on demand, but on demand is really a fantastic option. I can just give you one example. Last year, I was at midnight in the middle of Rome in the city center, and the bus passed by and it was completely empty. So even in big cities, sometimes big buses at a certain time at least do not make sense. And then the fantastic thing with on demand is really that you can say, okay, in off-peak hours, you put, for example, an on-demand shuttle. And then it's really up to the customer, to the user, to say at what time, from where to be picked up and where to go. And it's a win-win situation. It's fantastic for the user and also for the PTOs in the end, right? Because they don't have to have a high fuel consumption through the big buses, maintenance, and different driver licenses now, depending a little bit on the different countries, but not necessarily you need then the bus driver license, just as an example. So there are definitely other options than just the MaaS bus that they can look into. And there are solutions.
Thank you so much. I would say due to time, unless you want to add something, Harold?
No?
No. Due to time, I would say let's move to conclusion, and we'll try and answer all of the questions personally to the people afterwards. So, Kati, Harold?
Harold, the floor is yours.
Yeah, well, first of all, Johan, Laura, thank you very much for joining us. All you on the floor here, also thank you for being with us. I hope we could give you a little bit different angles on a topic that is, I think, absolutely crucial for all of us. I think it is not an easy one, but I think it is one that we really have to create forward. So I think taking your example out of Oslo and maybe to other cities, but also what you're doing at ioki to just scale all those things, and hopefully we get going on this and it can accelerate. So because actually we have a little bit of a tendency that everybody is on a standstill on mobility of various reasons. I think we have to really get going here again. And so thank you very much for joining us. And of course, Esther and Kati, thank you very much for setting the scene and preparing this. Back to you, Kati.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all of you for joining today. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.